In the childhood, the diagnosis concerning mental issues should always be written in pencil. The pathologization of the differences in the clinical process and education. This book is traversed by eventful, but not random encounters that led me, in recent years, to meet other professionals from different countries, asking similar questions. Along with many other professionals in the health, education and social sciences fields, we have built a collective thought that started questioning certain given knowledge. Each one with his own story and style, and yet with a common ethic. The proposal to establish guidelines that enable us to build a world where there is a place for all and every one of us, respecting diversity, and without the need of devastating homogeneity. Contribute to a common weave, which allows thinking about the subject within a political, social, historical, and family setting. To understand what the current problems are and in turn intertwine possible paths that will only emerge from the joint work. In the same way as we think that singular problems do not have individuality as the only cause, solutions will not come from distinctive features. It will only be through cooperative work and collective contribution that novel answers can be given. The medicalizating and pathologizing machinery during childhood works transferring to the medical field, inherent to life problems, that is to say that, collective, social and political issues, are approached and treated as individual problems, putting down biological reference as the main cause, although it has not been verified. When problems that are outside the area of medicine are defined in terms of disorders and addressed as medical problems, the result is a process of medicalization of life. It is with growing concern that we notice that this phenomenon has risen exponentially in childhood, with a consequent increase in consumption of psychotropic drugs in children. We come across a common denominator: children who fail in their acquisition possibilities of systematized learnings at school and that are pigeonholed as sick and therefore medicated. Centering the problem on the child ignores the difficulties that may be taking place, for example, in the teaching-learning process, the school structure or the social-political conditions. It is in this scenario where the so-called learning and/or behavior disorders appear, where the focus is on the person who should learn but fails to do so, that should behave but, on the contrary, disturbs, instead of questioning if there is any relationship between the increase in children with alleged disorders and the inappropriateness of a school system that tries to educate children of the 21st century with models and references from the 19th century. The expansion of the areas of competence medicine is fostered by a growing and powerful industry that has given rise to the process of over-medicalization of life. We understand that the prevalent and ever-increasing learning and behavioral problems must be understood as the product of a society that promotes a lifestyle that is more and more competitive, target-oriented and consumption-driven. We think it is of utmost importance to understand the connection person-society from a complex interrelationship perspective. We address our clinical work proposing that in the same way that children begin writing their first letters in pencil, professionals dealing with children's mental health, and by the same token, should use a pencil to write those first diagnostic hypotheses, which on the one hand are absolutely necessary and part of the healing process, but on the other hand, should never leave an indelible mark in the subject's life. Diagnostics should function as a guiding compass for practitioners, always taking into account that they are built on a development process that is in constant transformation. I envision the clinical process as a place where gerunds coexist. Playing, waiting, causing, inventing. It will all come down to building partial truths, written in pencil, which make room for new rewritings that will in turn help to come up with various strategies for that situation that will always be in a review state. A topic that we are particularly concerned about is the use of the diagnosis as an alibi in the clinical processes with children. We've noticed an increase of referrals made by schools of children that do not come to the school's expectations, and they are quickly tagged using different diagnostics such as attention deficit disorder with or without hyperactivity, ADHD, or oppositional defiant disorder, ODD, and, in less amount of cases, as pervasive development disorder, PDD, or bipolar. Children who, in fact, could be subjected to situations of abuse and/or violence, usually domestic, which were not detected by the professionals. When diagnoses are performed only by taking into consideration the children's observable behavior, without going into detail about the various causes that lead a child to express his discomfort through these behaviors, then there's a high risk of transforming the clinic process into a series of bureaucratic procedures that exonerate those who run them but that do not address the underlying problems that cause such suffering. We addressed the issue of the work of subjective constitution in the clinical process with seriously ill children and their parents, which leads us to a first question. What would be the effects in the lives of children and their parents, when as soon as early signs arise, which are certainly alarming, they become definitive, disabling and immovable diagnoses? He represents a way of working that binds together the child and his parents, making another type of discovery possible. Based on the therapeutic work, a child will appear. Founding movements, opening moments. I intend to create a demand in a child who seems not to ask, to open the door so that a vital desire begins flowing. Ultimately, build the pathways of intersubjectivity between the child and his parents. I want to deconstruct the limits that are often imposed on these children and their parents, with restraints that are more associated with the resistance and prejudices of professionals, than to the child's inabilities. Currently, there are heated debates about the ways of approaching these children. An allegedly scientific struggle, tinted by many political, biopolitical and mainly economic interests, and a fierce attack to psychoanalysis. On the other hand, the most traditional psychoanalysis seems dormant or hidden in its own trench, unaware and seemingly unable to satisfy and alleviate today's discomforts. However, if we set ourselves the challenge of developing and practicing a questioning practice, that can build on the edges, walk in the borders, and that makes room for the singularity, taking into account the social historical context, starting from what exists and building what never was there, that way of addressing the practice will most certainly have much more to contribute in the work with these children and their families.